up guys, welcome back to my channel, and in today's video we're going to be revisiting a subject that I talked about 6 months ago in a video, and that is paying off debt versus investing. Today is going to be kind of like a brainstorm strategy session, and if you're new here, hey, I'm Lo, and my husband and I are working on paying off almost $400,000 of debt. We have paid off $90,000 as of the time that I'm filming this video, and each kind of phase of our debt-free journey we have reevaluated our strategy to figure out what will maximize our progress but also maximize our happiness. So in today's video we're going to talk through a concept that I actually brought up on Instagram, and if you're not following me on Instagram, I'll put my Instagram right here. I do a lot of polls and interact with you guys more personally over there, so follow me on there if you want to see me more in between videos. But anyway, I threw out this question on Instagram because I was doing our budget for July and I was thinking about what we were going to do with the extra $600 or $700 we had in our budget. And usually we throw every extra dollar to debt. But in this case, I had a brainstorm because I've been reading a lot of articles lately and headlines about inflation, and we just refinanced our student loans, and so most of our debt is pretty low interest rate. We've got 2 student loans that are at 2.94%, and then our home equity line of credit, which is the debt we're targeting, which is at 4% currently, and that is variable, so it could go up. But anyway, I was doing our budget and I was looking at the $650 or so that we had extra that I was just gonna put as a line item towards our home equity line of credit to pay towards debt. And I just felt like it made more sense to split it half and half and put half of that towards debt and half of it into investment accounts. So that is how I set up our budget for July. I did split it half and half, and the investment accounts I'm talking about are after-tax brokerage accounts. They're not retirement accounts. We already have a separate plan for contributions to our retirement accounts, and we've contributed this year to my husband's 401k, my Roth IRA, and yeah, so this is separate from that. I do make videos every month updating you on our annual financial goals where I talk about all our retirement contributions and stuff like that, but this sort of investing I'm talking about is like on top of all that. So I mentioned to you guys about inflation. Inflation is rising here in the US, and typically inflation has been around 2 or 3%, and now it's risen to 5%, and so your money is worth less and less. And I do not know enough about economics to give like a full explanation of that. I was doing some reading before filming this video, and that is like a whole kind of world that I would need to do a lot more research on to talk about it in a competent way. But suffice it to say, inflation is rising, which means your dollars are worth less. So that was one thing that was on my mind that made me feel like, okay, investing money to have it grow might be a good idea right now versus just paying off low interest debt because inflation is on the rise. The other factor that I was thinking about is I just quit my job. So if you're not familiar with my channel and you're just coming across this video, I was working as a full-time attorney for the past 6 years and I hated it, and I just quit my job and I am pursuing YouTube full-time. So my husband works at a full-time position and I work, you know, doing YouTube and YouTube related business. So I do have some income. However, the income I'm making from YouTube is not yet matching the income from my full-time job. I did take a pay cut when I quit my job. So at least for now, we're not gonna have as much cash on hand coming in each month as when I was working full-time. So my other thought is that it might be nice on top of our emergency fund to have some non-retirement investments that we could access if we needed to. So there's kind of 3 ways that I see this could play out if we go forward with this strategy, and I'm pretty much okay with all of them. So I'm feeling like this is the way we're gonna go, but let me talk through each of the scenarios so I can explain to you how I'm thinking about this and why this seems like the least risky move to make to split our extra money between investing and debt payoff. But before I get into those, I do want to mention some of the highlights from my video that I posted 6 months ago about paying off debt versus investing, and I'll link it up here and in the video description if you want to check it out. In that video, I talked about 3 pros for paying off debt and then 4 pros for investing. The pros for paying off debt is financially risky, and so if you lose a job and you have debt payments, you can't just tell the lender, oh, I can't afford it this month. Whereas for investing, if you're investing and you lose a job, you just stop investing for a period of time. So debt can be risky in that way. The second pro I mentioned for paying off debt is that there is emotional relief that's associated with debt payoff. So generally when you pay off debt, you feel better and it makes you happier, and debt carries stress with it. So there's that benefit of paying off debt. And then also for paying off debt, you, as long as you have a fixed interest rate, it's a guaranteed rate of return on your money. So if your interest rate is 3% or 4% or 5% or whatever, you know that's the rate of return you're getting on the money as you're making those debt payments. Whereas if you invest, it can be variable. Sometimes it can be negative, sometimes it can be positive, depending on how the market is doing at the time you're investing. On the other side, pros about investing that I mentioned in that video. One, overall the stock market has a higher rate of return than you get by paying off debt if you have no high interest debt. So like we have debt that is between 3 and 4%. If you have a credit card that has 20% interest, that's generally gonna be higher than you could get on any stock market returns over a long period of time. Maybe over a short period of time you could get that, but in the long run you're not going to get that type of return generally, like based on historical data. So paying off high debt is a good idea, but if you have low interest debt like we do, you're generally going to get a higher rate of return over the long run with investing versus paying off debt. Next, the benefit of time. The sooner you invest, the longer your money has to grow and compound, so investing sooner is better. And then wealth building is fun. It is fun to see your money grow, where paying off debt, it can be fun, but not in the same way I think it is to see your money grow. And then finally, there's tax benefits to investing. And in that video, I was talking more about like retirement accounts. There's certain tax benefits you get from investing in retirement accounts, like tax-free growth and stuff. In this video, I'm talking about investing in a brokerage account, which is an after-tax account that's not a retirement account. So it doesn't have the same tax benefits as retirement accounts, but you do get certain tax treatment. And I am not a tax professional. This is just like stuff that I've learned on my own. If you have questions about how things are taxed, definitely go seek professional advice. So it's a quick summary of the points that I made in that video. I go into a lot more detail in that video. So let's get into the 3 scenarios. If we go this route of putting half our extra money into a brokerage account and half towards extra debt payments, then these are the 3 things that could potentially happen as I see it. Scenario 1, our brokerage account does well, the stock market does well, and our investments grow at a rate greater than 3 or 4%, which is the interest rate we're paying on our debts. So overall, we make out better and we have more money in the long term. And in this scenario, we don't have any job losses. So my husband doesn't lose his job and, my income keeps increasing. So we're able to pay off our debts over the long run. It maybe takes a little longer, but we still pay off our debts and we can afford to pay our debt payments all the way along. And we end up better off at retirement because we've put that money into a brokerage account and it's grown faster than it would have if we just threw it all to debt. The next scenario is kind of like a twist on the first scenario, and that is a situation where, again, we don't have any job losses, so we can continue to afford to pay our debt payments, but the stock market doesn't do well in the short term. And so while we are putting money into this brokerage account, it doesn't really grow, or it goes down in value, and the other half of our money we're putting towards debts and we're getting a better return on that. So overall in the short term, we are not ending up better off, and it ends up taking longer to pay our debts off because we're not putting every extra dollar towards debt. And in the long run, we end up, maybe better, but maybe not. Because if the stock market does poorly in the short term, if we leave that money in there for the long term, based on historical data, it will eventually beat that 3 or 4% interest rate that we have on our debts. So we may not make out better in the short term, but over the long run, I think we still would have more money at retirement or down the road than we would if we threw everything towards our debt. Again, in this scenario, it would still take longer to pay off our debts, and we would maybe not end up that much better off because the stock market had a bad, number of years or something like that. But we would likely end up at least a little bit better off as long as the stock market beat that 3 or 4% interest that we're paying on our debts over the long run. Now that I think about it, there's actually 4 scenarios. Okay, so the next scenario, the third scenario, would be a situation where the stock market does well and beats the 3% or 4% that we're paying on our debts. So the stock market returns 4% or more over the short term, and we have a job loss. So, YouTube doesn't work out and I start making nothing from YouTube, or my husband loses his job and for a period of time we have no income coming in from him, or minimal income from unemployment or something like that. And in that scenario, I still feel like it makes sense to have money in this brokerage account, because in that case, instead of all those extra debt payments already being paid towards debt, so we can't use it to pay our minimum payments, Instead, we would have this extra money stashed to the side that we could then use towards debt payments or bills, whatever we needed at that point. And in this scenario, like I said, the stock market did well in the short term, so that money grew. And so cashing it out in the short term, although not ideal, because investing, generally I think should be for the long term, we still would cash that out, we would pay some tax on it, and then be able to use it to pay our bills. And it would be kind of like a bonus emergency fund, because we have a $20,000 emergency fund, and we're not really going to grow it anymore at this point while we're paying off debt, because that's a number we feel very comfortable with. It's the largest emergency fund we've ever had in our entire lives. And so this would be like a bonus emergency fund, but it wouldn't just be sitting in a savings account or a high yield savings account earning next to nothing, like 0.5% interest. It would be earning potentially more in this scenario because the stock market would be returning 4.5%, 5%, 6%, 7% or more. So that gives me peace of mind knowing that we would have that money set aside. Now the fourth scenario will be worst case scenario. So in this scenario, the stock market does poorly in the short term, and so whatever money we put into that account lost money, and then we have a job loss. So we have a period of time where we don't have enough income to live off of and pay the minimums for our bills, and we've got money that we invested in the stock market and it went down in value, and now if we cash it out, we're gonna be way worse off because we had more money before and it was, dropped by 1/3 or half or something, and if we had just paid it towards our debt. But still, in worst case scenario, it would give us the option to take from that brokerage account, even if it was at a loss, and use it to pay some of our bills and our debts. And it wouldn't end up being the best investment overall, because we would have been better off if we had just paid it towards debt or kept it in a savings account for that matter in this scenario, but we still would have some extra available cash, because really the bulk of the investing we're doing is all in retirement accounts. And that's not money we can access easily at a young age without getting some sort of tax hit or penalty. So even though an after-tax brokerage account that was, had a loss would not be a great idea to pull from, we could pull from it. And then let's say that job loss, it was a temporary period of time and our emergency fund carried us through that, and then we were able to get our income back up again within a few months to pay all of our bills. We could know that it was there. We could know that money was there in the after-tax brokerage account, but we wouldn't have to pull from it. And it would just give us that extra peace of mind. Before I quit my job, we got to the place where we could live off of one income, and that's what we essentially are doing now that I quit. We could live off of just my husband's income. So before, I wasn't so worried about if one of us lost a job, because I knew the other person's job could carry us. Obviously, if we both lost our jobs, that would be, a major issue, but the chances of that are unlikely in the professions that we were in. So now that I don't have full-time employment like I used to, if my husband lost his job, it would be a bigger deal. And so I'm just trying to think strategically, and also just for peace of mind so I can sleep at night, what is the best way to manage our money at this point. And right now, we're not talking about thousands of extra dollars. Like I said, for July, we have about $650 that's extra. So we're talking about the matter of $300 or so, or $325 that we are either gonna put towards debt or investing. And that's not a small amount of money. Every dollar matters, and a few $100 over time adds up and can make a huge difference. You'd be surprised at how much small amounts add up when you're trying to make progress towards financial goals. So I don't want to discount any amount of money and not be strategic and think through all the options that we have for our money at any given point. And while, some months it may be less than that, some months it may be only $100 or $200 extra that we have to put towards our debt or into investments. And other months it may grow and be a lot more. And so this decision becomes really, really important, because it's maybe an extra couple thousand at some point, hopefully. So that's why I'm thinking through this in this way. One other thing I wanted to say is, because we have around $300,000 of debt we're trying to pay off, this is not something that is going to be done in the next 6 months to a year. If we were 6 months to a year away from paying off our debt, to me, it would be a no-brainer. I would just be I don't really care about that lost interest. I don't really care about worrying about so much about a job loss. I just want to get this debt paid off, and hopefully we'll just get it paid off quickly, and then we can have a lot more options. Everything will open up, because all the money that we're throwing towards debt will then have available to you know, put in an after-tax brokerage or beef up our emergency fund or do whatever we want with. So for us, because we have a number of years at least left to pay off our debt. I mean, we're 18 months into our debt-free journey at this point, and my goal in my head was like 5 to 6 years total to pay all this off. So that gives us like 3.5 to 4.5 years left to pay off all this debt. And that's not an amount of time that you can just like kind of survive through. Like, you need to have a sustainable long-term plan if it's gonna take you more than like a year or two to pay off your debt. I feel like if it's a, you know, 1 to 2 years, you can kind of just push through and get it done. But for us, I just feel like there's a little bit more strategy that needs to be involved because the amount of debt is so large and it will take us a while to pay it off. So let me know what you guys think. I am pretty certain this is what we're gonna do at least through the end of the year, but let me know what you guys think. Are there any factors that I'm not thinking of? Are there any reasons why we maybe wouldn't want to do this that I'm not thinking of? Let me know in the comments if you have anything to add to this analysis. I always love to hear what you guys have to say. You always have like very thoughtful, insightful comments, so I really appreciate you guys giving your input and working through these things with me. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. It really helps out my channel, and if you want to follow along and watch us pay off almost $400,000 of debt all the way down to zero, then make sure you hit that red subscribe button. I'd love to have you as a subscriber, and I'll see you guys soon in my next video. Bye.